afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 13th of July 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen.
Hi, Mike.
The weather, bright, sunny.
It's glorious today. Absolutely glorious.
It's never glorious in Plymouth.
This is the best time to be in Devon right now, and it's just starting to break. It's going to be wonderful this summer.
Right, okay, well, heating up here. Let's see where else is heating up. We've got Matthew Rycroft. We mentioned him yesterday. He is the UK ambassador to the United Nations, and he was giving a statement yesterday of the UK mission to the United Nations at the UN Security Council Open Debate on the Middle East. And he was talking about Iraq, actually, at the beginning. We're not going to mention that today, or perhaps later on, but at the end of his speech, he said, turning briefly to Syria, we're deeply alarmed by the credible reports that regime forces have begun an advance in Daraya, a town which the Office of the Special Envoy for Syria confirmed had no significant presence of Daesh or Nusra. This is not only a breach of the cessation of hostilities, it clearly undermines the regime's own declarations for a period of calm. That's what he began with. Then he went on to say, at the same time, the regime has effectively cut the last supply route into the east of Aleppo City. Encirclement of East Aleppo City threatens the lives of 300,000 people, potentially increasing the number of besieged people in Syria to over 800,000. We've already seen the intensity of violence in Aleppo countryside, causing many thousands to flee to the Jordanian border, increasing the pressure on stretched resources. So, Patrick, East Aleppo, that is a stronghold of Daesh and al-Nusra Front.
Yeah, it is. It's exclusively terrorist-held area, effectively. So let's just dispense, which we'll show you in a minute. We can just about now formally dispense, at least the U.S. leadership dispensing with the myth, the unicorn known as the moderate rebel in Syria. This is the fact. So you have Matthew Rycroft is basically telling you only half the story. He's only giving you a peek in through the keyhole. Let's open the door for a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah, so let's just finish off what he said. So we repeat our call once again for those states who have influence with the Syrian regime to ensure an immediate halt to those offensive and respect to those offences, I guess that's supposed to say, and respect for the cessation of hostilities in place. Those attacks are unconscionable and without justification. And really what he's saying is here, please somebody come and help protect our tame terrorists.
Our terrorists. So what he's not telling you is that there's 300,000 people in eastern Aleppo. The city is split in half, west and east. The west side is a government-held area. It's a secure area. Okay. Now the east side is a terrorist-held area. It's insecure. It's run by terrorists and organized criminal gangs, basically, that are armed, that happen to be supported by the U.S. and UK government, along with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others who are in the confab, trying to basically destabilize Syria. So many people, there used to be a million or something more people in eastern Aleppo. They've fled. Where have they fled? Why are there only 300,000 people in the terrorist-held area that Matthew Rycroft is calling to help? Because they've fled to the government-held area. Why? Because they wanted security. Because they didn't want to live under a terrorist rule. So this is what he's not telling you. This is very cynical portrayal.
Disingenuous, really, at best, isn't it?
It's more than disingenuous. It's intentionally designed to mislead people as to what's really going on. So and so they say they've cut off supply routes to the east. This is it's exclusively a terrorist-held area. Internationally recognized terrorist groups who are terrorizing the civilian population. Some people are still living there because they've decided to stay there. They've got homes, businesses, whatever, and they'll just, whatever.
Tough it out,
and hopefully something good comes at the end. But this is the deception that we've become so used to with regards to the Syrian conversation.
So Ahrar al-Sham and groups like this have long been held by the British in particular, and the United States as well, to be moderates.
They're rebels.
Nice guys.
Yeah.
Just opposition to the regime.
Mm-hmm.
But Vanessa here suggesting that, reporting, in fact, that John Kerry has put the kibosh on that?
Well, this is extraordinary. So I don't know whether this was by accident or intentional, but U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who's always held this line that we must protect the moderate rebels. Russia, please don't bomb the moderate rebels, and so forth. And so the coalition, trying to avoid bombing these moderate rebels, right? And this is what the ceasefire negotiations was about. Now here's John Kerry basically saying Jashar Islam, Arar Sham, he's calling them terrorist groups, accusing them of vicious suicide bombs. So he's basically dispensing with the moderate rebel line. Now, whether he's done this, is this an act of buffoonery? It wouldn't be the first, by the way, from John Kerry, but I don't think it is an act of buffoonery, Mike. I think this is intentional. I think, personally, this when governments, deceptive governments like the U.S., like the U.K., and those who are involved in international subterfuge to destabilize countries, which they do and have done many times in recent history, when they start admitting things like this, it means they're pulling back and preparing for some sort of an October surprise, maybe something big, and also to soften the blow for Hillary Clinton, because she is the architect of, through the Friends of Syria and these international GCC partnered confabs, is one of the architects of the Syrian conflict, essentially. So she's now going to come under the spotlight in the next few weeks and months before the presidential election in November in the United States. So this is a way maybe of pulling back the scrutiny, if you will, of what's going on in Syria just long enough so that she can get an easier path into the White House and not be under too much scrutiny over the policy regarding Syria. That's clearly a totally failed and deceptive policy that is completely built upon a series of lies that have been propagated by the U.S. government, by the UK government, and by most of the NATO allies.
Okay, so two things then. Looking over the last 6 to 12 months, there have been times where it seems that Kerry has been completely out of lockstep with Obama. So he's telling a different story to the one that Obama is telling. But also, where does this leave the joint narrative between the UK and the US then?
I'm not sure. Maybe they're decoupling temporarily. The U.S. election is number one.
Or is this just a purely Kerry going out on his own?
If this could be Kerry going out on his own, maybe because maybe there's another job waiting for John Kerry. Who knows? Maybe a vice presidential nomination by Hillary Clinton. I'm not sure, but certainly we need to be thinking along these lines. The Matthew Rycroft, let me just add, calling the regime, the Syrian government, this term is so loaded, the regime. You hear this, the regime forces, the regime. This is a kind of pejorative, derogatory term that's stuck and labeled to this. That is the Syrian government. Those aren't regime forces. That is the Syrian army. This is the Syrian police, just like the British Metropolitan Police, just like the British Army, okay, defending their own country against foreign mad jihadist invaders. That's not the regime. That is the government. And effectively, that is the Syrian people. And that is the overwhelming majority in Syria. So it's not the regime. So any politicians who are using the word regime are clearly peddling a specific geopolitical agenda that, in my opinion, is in league with international organized criminal racketeering on the highest level.
We're going to come on to that towards the end of the program. You wanted to highlight this one, Patrick, the SAS, pretty angry about what's going on in Iraq.
Well, there's SAS chief basically accusing the U.S. methods in Iraq. And some of this came as a result of the Chilcot inquiry. So again, within the 2.5 million words, that is the gargantuan, epic mountain of documents produced by Sir John Chilcot. So this story comes out accusing the Americans of running basically death squads in Iraq. Now, we've been saying this many times before. In fact, Vanessa Beeley, who's a contributor to 21st Century Wire, she had a kind of public spat on Twitter with Robert Ford, former U.S. ambassador to Syria, and brought up the fact that Robert Ford was stationed under John Negroponte in the Green Zone. John Negroponte was in Central America, in Nicaragua, during the proliferation of these death squads, which were U.S.-backed, which were called freedom fighters or Contras. So this is the exact same scenario, Mike, is what we see in Syria. Moderate rebels, freedom fighters, death squads. We see this in Iraq as well. So Robert Ford was in position there, and he denied it. He said, "Oh, death squads, it's conspiracy theory." There's the head of the SAS, right? Basically saying that exact same thing that we've been saying over and over again now for years. So maybe it's finally coming out. Maybe some people are breaking ranks and want to speak truth about the level of violence and the deliberate undermining and trying to stoke sectarian division between Shias and Sunnis in Iraq. That forget about what Tony Blair tried to say during his mea culpa last week, and trying to blame sectarian divisions as a natural, organic phenomenon in Iraq, and denying that it had anything to do with our intelligence agencies in the West and our military policies on the ground by pitting group against group to create instability. It seems to me like some people are breaking ranks now when to talk about this crime.
The other thing that RT, we didn't include it today, but the other thing that RT was reporting that's come out of the Chilcot inquiry was the British government's attitude to helping clean up Iraq after covering it with a layer of depleted uranium, and the answer to that is basically no way. Well, if there are people in this country pretty motivated to get Tony Blair into The Hague, I think there should be people in this country equally motivated to say we've got some responsibility for cleaning up that mess.
We shouldn't be using depleted uranium munitions, yet this is a big seller on the military-industrial hardware shopping list.
In fact, we've got Farnborough going on at the moment. I'm quite sure there's plenty of that kind of material available there.
And there are I'm going to give a sneak preview that we will be talking about. There are reports coming out of Italy that NATO is using part of the island of Sardinia as a sort of test range for depleted uranium munitions, just putting a layer of DU on the island of Sardinia. That is a shocking report. We're going to investigate that further. Well, I just wanted to put that out because hopefully we'll see something. We want to find out exactly, is that the case? And if so, how severe is that, what's going on there in Italy?
Well, speaking of Chilcot, you launched this shout poll on 21st Century Wire at the weekend. And let's see, this is should Tony Blair be tried for war crimes in The Hague? Let's have a look and see what's going on there. Well, that's 1,000 votes so far, Patrick, and 94% of people. I'm disappointed with that result, I have to say.
Not enough.
It's not enough.
So 94% say Tony Blair should be tried for crimes, war crimes in The Hague, and 6% say no, he shouldn't. So he does have a few allies, Mike. There. So that's out of a sample so far of 1,000. Let me just tell you, Mike, this is 1,000 votes for this shout poll. This is the fastest traction we've had on voting. It's even faster than the Brexit poll that we did, which we only ran for, I think, about 72 hours and had about 1,800 votes at the end. This Tony Blair poll will run for a few more days. Maybe we'll extend it till the end of the month, but it's outpacing the Brexit poll. This should be an indication, Mike, of what the general public sentiment is. I know our readers are probably very anti-war in general, so maybe our poll is skewed somewhat. So there should be a big margin of error there as to what the general feelings is. But 94% want Tony Blair in The Hague, and that's just a small sample, Mike. But it represents a bigger feeling.
Okay, well, defence procurement, we've been talking about this over the last couple of days, and it's with Farnborough on at the moment a key subject, and we've been pointing out that, of course, most of the big contracts have been going to non-British companies, particularly Boeing. Well, this is Philip Dunn, who is the Minister for Defence Procurement, and so he's throwing the consolation prize at BAE now. He's giving them a contract for supporting Typhoons. Now, this is mildly amusing because, of course, British companies aren't getting the lion's share of the support contracts for the F-35, which is a bit disappointing because the F-35 is so unreliable that it needs a ton of support. So probably British companies would have done quite well if they had won those contracts. But anyway, this is the MOD announcing a landmark. They describe a 10-year support arrangement for the RAF's Typhoon jets, which is going to see £500 million saved and apparently reinvested in the aircraft. I suspect that might be partly because the F-35 isn't going to be replacing the Typhoon anytime soon. So this was announced at Farnbury, as we say. RAF's Typhoon jet, they say, is a formidable battle-winning aircraft, which is enhanced by cutting-edge weapon systems. So there you go. That's great.
And how many of those are in the British Air Force? How many Typhoons are operational at the moment?
Not many.
How many could they deploy tomorrow if they wanted to bomb Syria, for instance?
I don't know the answer to that, but how many of them are flyable at any point in time?
A dozen?
Something along
Two
those
dozen,
lines. Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
So,
Small numbers.
yeah.
Now this is from the Duran, and this is confirmed. The headline says NATO and the EU will meld into one super organization. Now I'm not sure that we necessarily see this quite along these lines, but this is referring to the NATO communique, which came out of the Warsaw Summit. We discussed this earlier in the week. So I wanted to highlight a couple of the quotes out of that communique, which refer to the European Union. In the communique, the NATO says, we remain committed to a continued coherent international approach, in particular between NATO and the European Union. NATO's response is in support of this overall effort, which includes sanctions as decided by the EU, the G7 and others to promote a peaceful solution to the conflict. We have a conflict.
Which conflict is that?
And to address Russia's actions.
Oh, so we're at war with Russia.
Well, not quite sure that's saying quite that, but certainly the language is along those lines, and it continues to be pretty strong. Then another section, they go on to say, though the longer-term adaptation measures of the Readiness Action Plan, through the longer-term adaptation measures of the Readiness Action Plan, we have agreed a strategy on NATO's role in countering hybrid warfare, which is being implemented in coordination with the EU. This enables our armed forces to work together successfully, be it in NATO operations or in national coalition, EU or UN formats, which contributes to our common security. And elsewhere it says the alliance is committed to effective cooperation and coordination with partners and relevant international organizations. In particular, the EU has agreed in efforts to counter hybrid warfare. Elsewhere it says NATO will continue to work closely with the EU as agreed to ensure our smart defence, and the EU's pooling and sharing initiatives are complementary and mutually reinforcing, and to support capability development and interoperability with a view to avoiding unnecessary duplication and maximizing cost effectiveness. They go on to say, and I think this was the part which is quoted in here in this article. It says the European Union remains a unique and essential partner for NATO. Enhanced consultations at all levels and practical cooperation in operations and capability development have brought concrete results. They say that they want to further enhance the relationship between it. So the language is all this kind of in a further enhancement, closer ties, more cooperation, and really the question, Patrick, is this headline on the Duran quite accurate, or will it actually end with the EU and NATO melding into one super organization, or will it actually go beyond that? Because elsewhere in this document, they're talking about NATO cooperation with the African Union as well.
Well, I think part of the answer to that, Mike, is baked into what you just read there, particularly the part about wanting to avoid any unnecessary duplication and increase cost effectiveness. Those lines, this is a NATO summit, those lines are grafted directly off of the EU's joint military organization that handles procurement and manages joint projects between EU countries. Yes. We actually read part of that document on our Insight on the EU Army, which will be coming out soon.
Yeah.
So that is grafted. So that's NATO grafting off of EU joint military policy and development organization papers. So that tells me that NATO's reading from the EU military integration script. It's quite clear. We just heard it right there.
Yes.
So there's part of your answer there. But in terms of this headline from the Duran, I don't think it's a case maybe of NATO and the EU melding into one. I think they already have melded into one, Mike. I think they are melded in one. I think what they're doing now is they're trying to formalize some sort of structures and the bureaucracy of an integrated EU military. They're trying to work this out now. And so I think it's a question of, even if there is an EU army one day, Mike, or an EU EDF, European Defense Force, there will still be NATO. It's still going to exist because what NATO is a brilliant tool. It allows the West to go unilaterally without flying any flag of any country. So you can destroy a nation, you can undermine a nation, you can carry out top secret intelligence operations like Operation Gladio on European soil, killing European innocent civilians, and you're totally unaccountable because this is a confab that is built off of a treaty and sits outside of any sort of real accountability. So NATO is a very useful tool, will always be there. So I think it will run parallel with an EU defense force in the future.
I think that's absolutely right. So, but military integration, absolutely a key policy agenda globally at the moment.
Yeah, and we're seeing that right across the globe. We'll talk about RIMPAC in a few minutes.
Right. Okay, we'll move on then. Completely different subject. Social work, and this is really, I think, needs to be seen in the light of the named person scheme in Scotland. This is a House of Commons report, the Education Committee, and they are talking about a new professional body being required for social workers. They're saying that the government should scrap its plans for setting up a new social work regulator and instead establish a strong professional body for social work to take a lead in helping deliver improvements. They're saying that social work is being pulled in different directions by the different agencies of government, and so therefore we've got to tie it much closer into government and have better integration between government departments and so on. And this is Neil Carmichael on screen at the moment, who's the chair of the Education Select Committee. He said social workers have a crucial role in improving outcomes for children, young people and families. He said there's a pressing need for greater coordination within government on the future of social work in England. Oh, I thought there was another one there. I apologise. He went on to say the appointment of 2 chief social workers, apparently against the wishes of the profession, has exacerbated the problem that we were discussing earlier. And he said we recommend the government move to 1 chief social worker, which will unify the profession at a national level and encourage joined-up thinking within government. We're just seeing this as a further move towards a named person type situation arriving in the UK wide, never mind in Scotland, because we've got all these social work related problems which have to be addressed. It is absolutely a problem reaction solution type situation we're witnessing here.
And one of the phrases in that statement, Mike, that disturbs me a little bit, and maybe people should look into a little bit more, is the term thinking within government. So I didn't know government was a person. I didn't know a government isn't a thinking thing. A government performs and administrates things on behalf of the people.
Yeah.
At least it does in a democracy anyway. But maybe other governments are thinking things.
Yes.
But what is this thinking within government, Mike? And what exactly does that mean? That's kind of a disturbing.
I think that the meaning of that has changed somewhat in the last few years. Yes.
Okay.
Right. Brexit then. This is the chairman of Wetherspoon's pub chain, one of the biggest pub chains in the country, Tim Martin. He's basically invoking Magna Carta here. He's saying Brexit is a modern Magna Carta. He's saying that the referendum was cataclysmic. He's saying that democracy is back. Well, Pat, I have to say, first of all, I'm not seeing any sign that democracy is back. In fact, quite the opposite, and we'll come on to that in a second when we talk about the Labour leadership and the shenanigans there. But this invocation of Magna Carta, something which is vastly misunderstood, Patrick, is the nature of the constitution in Britain, and many, many people believe that it is an unwritten constitution, and that therefore it's kind of made up as we go along. In fact, what people have got to remember is that the constitution in this country is 1,200 years old at the very least. It comes from pre-Norman times, and Magna Carta was not a constitutional document in the sense of the US Constitution. Magna Carta was a peace treaty, and what it did was it restated, it was a restatement of principles which already existed. So the King John, was acting beyond his authority in true common purpose style. He was reined in by the barons and the townspeople and the other people that were running at Runnymede, and a peace treaty was signed. It was a peace treaty which put down principles that were understood. Every constitutional document that we have, the Bill of Rights is another one. In this case, the King was the Bill of Rights was particularly there to deal with the idea of divine right, which the Stuart Kings were trying to reinstate, the divine right of kings. So the Bill of Rights, another restatement of the same principles once again. So until that restatement happens, once again, we have lost the divine right of kings. The Queen is not performing her role, but what we have instead is the divine right of Parliament, the divine right of government, rather than the House of Commons, particularly the House of Commons, because they don't see that the House of Lords has any right to intervene in their actions. So it's the divine right of the House of Commons that we're seeing at the moment. And we're right back in the same situation that Britain has seen time and time again throughout its history. And we need another Magna Carta at this point, but that's a peace treaty. And we're not at that point yet. I think we're not too far away. Now, somebody in the chat box earlier was saying, when we were talking about the Syrian regime, should we be describing what's coming as the May regime? And I think we quite possibly should. We'll see how it pans out. But some of what she is likely to do over the next months, and particularly as we see the whole Brexit thing play out, it may be that we find ourselves back in the position where we need another peace treaty.
Well, Assad has one up on Theresa May. He was actually elected into presidency. At least they had an election, unlike this prime minister. So,
well, this is an interesting point, right? Because
I know it's only representational, through the party, but
yes,
technically you could make that argument if you want to talk about regimes.
Yes,
you could make that argument.
Yeah, absolutely. This article from The Street here. Here's what Deutsche Bank's huge problems mean for it and the global economy. This isn't so much a comment on Deutsche Bank, because we've commented on Deutsche Bank quite a lot over the last few days, but really about this particular article, because what Alex Oldman here is saying is Deutsche Bank stock has been hammered. The global banking experts have issued worrisome assessments of its health, but actually it's being caused by Brexit.
No, right, okay.
He's kind of hedging his bets a little bit in this article. He's saying on one hand it's been caused by Brexit, and he's saying on the other hand, well, the problems were already there. But really, the point that he's trying to make here is it's been caused by Brexit. So yes, the Brexit has had a hugely negative impact on Deutsche Bank's fortunes. He said Deutsche Bank has significant operations in the city and could see those operations adversely affected when Britain departs the European Union. In addition, the Brexit vote is just one more piece of economic news that has increased global financial volatility and shaken investor confidence. So Deutsche Bank's problems, nothing to do with derivatives, all to do with Brexit.
And who is Alex Oldman? He looks very young, Mike. He looks like maybe he just came out of university.
I think this is part of the problem with the mainstream media at the moment.
They've got kids working for them.
Yes.
So putting that old trope out that Brexit has crashed the world economy. I just might add, Mike, that yesterday the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at a record high. Did you know that?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, but if
and the FTSE 100 is doing the same kind of thing. But
so Brexit's destroyed the world economy. But so that idea is just so sophomoric and childish, because that's to deny the absolute endemic rot of the financial system. If Deutsche Bank's books can't be balanced, guess whose fault that is? Deutsche Bank's, not anybody else's. So that's how the real world works. But unfortunately, banks are political, Mike, and propping up banks, because banks can do dirty things for dirty governments and can crash markets and countries and destroy whole nations like Greece, if they want to. So they need to inflate and keep some of these banks going for a period of time until they can sell off their junk bonds to somebody else in the future if they have to break them up or whatever.
Well, we're going to be seeing just how political banks are in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, then even Ireland getting in on the act.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. So Ireland considering an EU exit in response to Europe's tax harmonization plan. So basically, we have a situation in Ireland where Ireland's a net contributor to the European Union.
It is now.
Now, that's a big flip, Mike, from 15 years ago, when EU, especially small-holding agricultural subsidies, were the thing that was actually buying favor of the EU in Ireland for many years. I would say, Mike, for the last 40 years?
Yeah. Maybe not quite
30,
that long, 30
years.
Yeah,
so this bought Middle Ireland this bought the loyalty of Middle Ireland for the EU and the middle classes as well. And so now the situation is shifting a little bit in Ireland. So now it's not such a rosy picture.
Well. In fairness to the Irish, we've got to remember the first Lisbon Treaty vote.
They voted out.
They voted out. So there was always an underlying wish to be not part of the European Union in Ireland.
More so as every year passes, I think.
Right. So that's the way it's going now. Of course, this headline might be exaggerating the situation a little bit because they're talking about a new pressure group demanding exit from the European Union. So I think we need to keep an eye on that one and offer them all the best. But hopefully that will build.
This will be an interesting story to follow.
Yes. Right. Theresa May, she takes the job today, of course. And, the Independent here discussing Mr. May then.
Yes, there's the lovely couple. There's Theresa there with her husband, Philip. And it's, as it turns out, and what really irks me, and is that this comes out after the coronation. So it turns out her husband is a senior executive at an investment fund that manages $1.4 trillion in assets. And so what is this firm? I believe the firm, according to the Independent, is called the Capital Group. This is listed in Los Angeles, which is one of the, U.S. is now the great offshore financial destination, by the way. You don't need to go to the Caymans anymore. You just go anywhere in the U.S. So what do? They manage assets of Amazon, Lockheed Martin, Philip Morris, Starbucks, who else? Merck and Company, very lovely, nice pharmaceutical company. They're from Europe, and J.P. Morgan. So does J.P. Morgan, does that put them in? That's Tony Blair's bank, right?
Bank, yeah.
So this is interesting, and this is the same Theresa May that said she's going to crack down on tax avoidance. And here her husband is managing one of the biggest corporate offshore sort of tax avoidant investment funds in the world. Isn't that interesting? I mean, you can't make this up. But this is what the Independent's reporting here. So it's interesting. Yeah. I mean, they've $20 billion in shares in Amazon and Starbucks alone. That's just part of their portfolio. God knows what else is in there. But this is extraordinary.
G4S, perhaps?
Yeah. And so her husband runs it out of a little office in Mayfair, up there near Savile Row. So that's nice.
That's where most of these types of companies are based.
Yeah. So this is the big money, Mike. This isn't the chump change. This is the big time. So her husband is a big player in the transnational financial.
It's interesting because many people, Dennis Thatcher always stayed in the background. He was kind of portrayed in the press as being a buffoon. He was always hiding in the background, but he was probably a much more significant player and it looks like we're right back to the same situation again.
Exact same situation. Yes. Extraordinary.
Well, in the meantime, the Prime Minister's job may have been settled, but Labour continues to implode. This is a blog post from Colin Talbot, who's Professor of Government at the University of Manchester, and he's decrying the fact that Labour's National Executive Committee decided to interpret the rules regarding the leadership election in Jeremy Corbyn's favour. And before we go on to this, Patrick, did you see Angela Eagle's press conference?
Yeah, that was funny. So it was kind of
it was a bit embarrassing.
It was, as if you could be embarrassed for Angela Eagle, but yet she managed to have that effect. It was also, there's kind of a smirk in her sort of tone that was a little bit, I don't know, sinister in a way, but she was crying out for the BBC. Is there anyone from the BBC here? And there was no answer. Okay, let's start with who's next? ITV. Is anybody for ITV? No answer.
And then they went to Channel 4.
And then finally Michael Crick.
The poor cousin of the other two.
Yeah, so Michael Crick from Channel 4 finally stepped forward and tried to help her out. So he's an interesting character as well.
Yes. Anyway, getting back to Colin Talbot then, he's saying those who wrote, this is the rules, those who wrote them made it abundantly clear that they were meant to create a level playing field for all nominees and crucially to ensure a filter of minimum support in Parliament for any Labour leadership candidate. And he goes on to say, now a third candidate has joined the fray, all but guaranteeing that the vote opposing Corbyn will be split, whilst his followers will largely remain united. And he says the outcome looks pretty obvious. A Labour Party, there we go, the outcome looks pretty obvious. A Labour Party with a leader of more than 80% of its MPs do not want. And I just thought that was a pretty staggering thing to say from somebody who's supposed to be a professor of government at a university. And he doesn't seem to understand what democracy is.
No, he's clearly a statist. So he's saying that forget about what the people want, forget about what the Labour Party membership wants. And Mike, the amount of people that registered as members of the Labour Party in the last 12 months is staggering. Right now, Labour membership dwarfs Conservative Party membership by an order of magnitude. I'm talking about what, sixfold?
Well, they've had more new members since the EU referendum than the Conservative Party has as a whole.
Yeah, the Conservative Party have 123,000 members nationwide, which is kind of a pathetically low number, and Labour has some 4, 5, 6 times more. I don't know what the exact number is, Mike, but it's a lot more, and it's amazing to see a comment like that from that academic. So I guess the people count for nothing. What the people want, who cares? It's what the MPs want, right?
I think it's a really important position that he has taken, because if we look at how democracy is being moulded and changed by the various change agents in Britain at the moment, we're being taken from this old idea of having a parliamentary monarchy through a representative democracy to a participatory democracy where only certain people get to participate. So it's the parliamentary Labour Party gets to participate, the NGOs and other lobby groups get to participate, but people don't get to participate. So that's why he doesn't view that the people are important in this, and what they think is not important as far as he's concerned.
And I can imagine what his views were on Brexit. I'm just guessing which side of that.
Oh no, you don't have to guess, because he's absolutely clear about it. He's crying about the fact that noises, or he's saying that noises from the Conservative Party are implying that they are now a pro-Brexit party and all this kind of thing. He was absolutely for Remain, and his blog post is full of the 48%. What about the 48%?
So the big noises, just to underline this, the big noises coming out of the sort of Remain camp, especially in the academia and the self-appointed intelligentsia, the middle class intelligentsia, is that working people cannot be trusted to decide to vote on the future of the country on any serious issue, and it's almost seemed like a terrible thing to give them the opportunity to participate in the actual democratic process on anything that's serious, that it's too important for the plebiscites. This is kind of where this group of people, this mode of thinking, I think it's a very dangerous little elite middle class intelligentsia that's kind of self-appointed itself to be the rightful guardians of democracy. It's kind of, especially in academia, this person's teaching students about government.
Absolutely.
That's amazing in itself,
yes,
Mike.
Absolutely. Right, let's move on. Back to 21st Century War. Patrick, The Purge.
The Purge, wow. You wouldn't believe, Mike, that they would release a movie like this in an election year in the United States. One of the most divisive elections in history. Hillary Clinton pitted against Donald Trump. So left-wing mobs have already, organized by George Soros-funded MoveOn.org, have already busted up most of the Trump political rallies, okay? And that's exactly along the theme of this film, which is about a sort of future dystopian story where the government allows a purge to happen once a year, where murder is legal, everything's legal, and this is designed as a pressure release valve for society. And the main character is from the Resistance Party, who wants to reform this terrible fascist system, is a blonde, middle-aged woman running for president who has a striking resemblance to Hillary Clinton. So this is Hollywood at its best in social engineering and manipulation.
Or is it a warning?
I don't know, but what the message is, and this is a great analysis if you go back to that slide by Sean Helton from 21st Century War. Fantastic analysis, one of the best he's done. And so he's basically saying it provides a dialectic, this film, which is you have two choices, either violent fascism or a violent left-wing overthrow, violent social justice, and like a la Black Lives Matter or whatever the group du jour is, basically. He's saying this is the only, they've got it framed in there, locked in there. So you can't have either or. You have to choose.
Yeah.
Violent right wing, violent left wing.
But violence either way.
Violence either way. And that's seen as the only way to reform society and to evolve. For society to evolve, according to Hollywood, is you have to have violence on either side. This is dangerous, Mike. And this is the kind of manipulation that this is tantamount to pernicious social engineering in a divisive election year on the part of Hollywood with this film. It is absolutely manipulative.
Okay, well, sticking with the U.S. presidential election and Hillary Clinton, well, we'll get to that in a second. But if you remember yesterday, we were talking about HSBC being too big to prosecute. And this was U.S. officials refusing to prosecute HSBC for money laundering in 2012 because of concerns within the Department of Justice that this would cause a global financial disaster. But the point that we were making was, where did these concerns come from? They came from George Osborne, who wrote to the Department of Justice saying that prosecuting HSBC would have very serious implications for financial and economic stability, particularly in Europe and Asia. So hold that thought, HSBC and so on. We move on to HSBC's website and we talk about a former US Deputy Attorney General joining HSBC's board. Who's this?
This is James Comey, who's now director of the FBI. Now, I didn't realize this is interesting. So he sat on the board of HSBC around that time when HSBC was being, the serious investigation for international money laundering involving some of the world's biggest organized criminal cartels, drug cartels. There is James Comey in the frame, okay? And let me remind everybody that HSBC is not only the drug cartel's bank of choice, they were slapped with a fine of, I think, $1.9 million, which in the large scheme of things, Mike, is
nothing.
Chump change. So not only are they the drug cartel's bank of choice that James Comey sitting on the board of, who also was the non-executive director of the Financial Systems Vulnerability Committee there as well. Okay, this is also the bank of choice of guess who? The Clinton Foundation. And guess who's running for president now? Hillary Clinton. And so
this is the same Hillary Clinton that has just been let off by the FBI?
By James Comey, let off by James Comey, who didn't want to pursue any recommendation to the Department of Justice for any criminal wrongdoing in admitted mishandling of classified information, Mike. And she you could say she lied about it to the previous congressional hearings, okay? She said, oh, there wasn't any classified document, and there was. So we've got her twice, basically. But who is James Comey? This looks to me, Mike, so this guy is at HSBC with, an organization laundering billions in drug money. So he's gone from there to the head of the FBI, okay? And the Clinton Foundation is also in there with HSBC. This looks to me like an organized crime syndicate. I mean, that's how I would look at it, and I'm thinking, is James Comey the fixer? Is this like the elite's fixer, basically? If you were the mob and you say, I've got to put my guy in an attorney general, we've got to get my guy in there, head of the FBI, let's get our guy in the head of the FBI, make sure that nothing serious happens here. And so Hillary Clinton been let off the hook by the DOJ. Loretta Lynch was also with James Comey, involved with the HSBC case, okay, where HSBC got off scot-free, basically. Right. They got a slap on the wrist, got paid a fine. And she's now head of the Department of Justice. The timing of this is unbelievable.
So some people expect that Hillary is going to be president then? Is that a fair statement? Some people expect that that's what's going to happen.
Not only is that's what's going to happen, it will happen, and they'll make sure that it happens, because all the scandals that are touching this criminal enterprise, which I think is international financial money laundering racket, basically all these scandals are being squashed at the key choke points. This is what it looks like, Mike, to a lay observer. Not only that, Comey was involved in 2004, the case of Sandy Berger, who was destroying evidence from the National Archive that was related to 9/11, okay? This was to protect the Clinton administration. James Comey, at the time, was Deputy Attorney General. So he was involved in that case. And guess what? They could have pressed a lot harder on that, and they didn't. And Berger got, I don't know, a slap on the wrist, ended up still being an advisor, convicted person being an advisor, I guess, so I'm told, of the Hillary Clinton Secretary of State, State Department, while she was there in that position. So there's Comey again. So does he have a relationship with the Clintons? Is he part of some kind of a syndicate? I'm asking this question because it sure looks interesting.
Yep. Okay. Well, who is James Stavridis then?
Well, he's an interesting person who's currently being vetted as one of Hillary Clinton's vice presidential candidates. I personally don't see her choosing someone who's an admiral in the Navy to be a VP. I think this might be a bait and switch. I think more likely John Kerry perhaps might be someone along those lines. I think she's going to be looking for a heavyweight choice, but I could be wrong, Mike. Who is this guy? He's also got a string of scandals behind him. And
so he's cleared of misconduct?
Well, he's cleared of misconduct, but some expenses fiddling here. This was quite a serious story back in 2012, charging the family vacations on the European CENTCOM budget. So clearly he's got friends in high places, Mike. This was basically put away in the back tray, and maybe because he was destined for bigger and better things in 4 years. And here we are 4 years later, and there's Mr. Stavridis being vetted as one of her vice presidential candidates. What this says is that if she does go for a military VP, what it says is that she's trying to bolster her security credentials, really competing. It shows she's worried about Donald Trump, who seems to have the favor of the military crowd in the United States and also in the terms of the global war on terror. This is Hillary's way of reassuring voters that she's tough on security. So this could be one way to look at it.
Right. Okay. Well, on that note, we'll end for today. Thanks for joining me today, Patrick. Brian will be back tomorrow, I'm sure. And we will see you at 1 o'clock as usual, hopefully. Bye-bye.